Hello, good people, and welcome to Kindred. Hello, Jen. Welcome
Hello,
back to another.
Kate.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So funny. You never call me Kate because that's not my family
I
name.
never call you Kate. Yeah,
We'll tell them
it's
later
very
what that
strange
is.
when I do, but yeah,
If you
it's
want
all
to know
good.
what my nickname in this family, you have to subscribe to
That's right.
Apple,
That's
to Kindred Plus to find out. We'll do a
exactly
nickname behind the scenes on
secret,
that.
secret reveal.
Oh,
Mhm.
lols. Anyway, yes, welcome back, everyone. Okay, sister. So we are jumping back into the ocean for this episode. We
One of my
often,
favorite places.
yes, right. We often head to the deep water of the world with our guests on this podcast, and we do love the ocean. If you have to say ocean or mountains, would you be ocean? Okay.
100%.
I would be
Mhm.
mountains, but then I'm like, you
Mm.
can have both.
This is
So,
why California blew my mind the first time I went there. It's like, wait, they don't have to choose?
oh
Are
yeah,
you
right.
kidding me?
Oh my
That's
gosh.
crazy. No wonder it's
Lucky.
so expensive to live there.
You, California. Always so lucky. Right? Right on. Yeah, totally. That's so true. Okay, question for you, sister.
Let's
When
go.
you have been in the ocean, what's something you think about? Do you become like acutely aware of your surroundings, and what are the thoughts that come to your mind?
Um,
Do you think
the
like
thoughts.
what might be swimming around you, or you just like zen in
I
there?
do think about that sometimes, or crawling.
Oh.
I think a lot about I've never been bitten by a crab, and so I
Mm-hmm.
don't ever want to be bitten by one. I'm sure it's not
Right.
as bad as I anticipate, but
Sure.
that's the thing I think a lot about when I'm
Okay.
in the ocean is stepping on a crab and being pinched.
So you have a place on the Cape that has an area of our subject today. So do you um or species that inhabits the area where
That's
you
true.
are, do you
Mhm.
ever think about sharks when you're in the water?
I do not, I will say I don't worry about sharks
Yeah,
when
okay.
I'm in the water
Yeah. Yeah.
at all.
Well, and you're on the bay, they're on the other side mostly, but Cape Cod does have a active, healthy
Oh,
shark.
yes. And a lot, that's mostly the first thing people ask about when I tell them we go there.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. And a
Yeah.
really good friend of mine, she's obsessed with sharks. She has this whole app where she can track them along the
Oh,
edge of
the
the Cape. It's really cool.
sharktivity. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. Yeah, I don't think about sharks either. I more am like, okay, what's brushing up against me? And
Right.
seaweed is far more likely to
Yeah.
than me leaping out of the water to dry
Truth for
land.
me too.
But
Yes.
I never think about sharks, which is
Me
just,
neither.
I'm happy about that. So,
Me too.
hey everyone, guess what the subject of our episode today is? Sharks. Yes, people, finally
Sharks.
we're covering this amazing subject. But before we get to that, our interview today, just a bit of admin before we go floating out into the gorgeous waters of South Florida. We have a favor to ask. We would love it if you would consider sharing either a favorite episode of yours or just the entire podcast. So, Jen, you and I were recently into, well, Kindred was recently interviewed by WHYY and a journalist named Julia Binswanger. And that's amazing. And we are so grateful for that and their interest in the podcast. That was an amazing moment for us. And that sort of exposure really helps get our conversations with our guests out there in the public eye. However, for us, word of mouth is huge. And
Hmm.
for an independently funded and created podcast like ours, it's really critical. So our ask is, and you and I do this all the time with episodes that we love
Yeah.
through our podcast. But when you do hear an episode that you especially connected to or really loved, please consider sending it to a family member, a friend, a coworker, in your community. And word of mouth is huge for us. So, and it's how I find a lot of podcasts too. I
Hmm.
ask friends and, you like, hey, what are you
Right.
listening to? What do you think? Um, so yeah, and thanks so much for your support. And our goal is to keep making episodes that you'll want to share. So please consider that. And thank you very much. Okay, so like I said, we are heading to South Florida to learn about shark ecology and conservation. And to do this, we have asked Dr. Catherine Macdonald, marine conservation biologist and shark ecologist, to lead us into this conversation. So, a bit about our guest. Catherine is a scientist and research assistant professor at the Rosenstiel School of Marine, Atmospheric, and Earth Science at the University of Miami. Like she said, it's a mouthful. Um, She is the director of the Shark Research and Conservation Program, which focuses on shark research and public science engagement and education, which we will talk about. And she is a co-founder of the Field School, a marine field science training program. And if you want to learn more about, Catherine and her students and team, you can jump on to the Miami University's website at sharkresearch.earth.miami.edu. This is where I got her. I shortened her bio. It's a long one. She does a lot, and it's incredible. So, the reason we wanted to talk to Catherine about sharks was actually not to hear all about well, let's see, what is she's like 1 in 5 million chance you could get bitten by a shark. I Googled it, like you're more likely to get struck by lightning or probably even a meteor for that matter.
Yeah, right.
Fact check me on that one. We are here to talk with her about her work, focusing on shark ecology and conservation and the marine habitats they live in and keep in balance. And I think we talk about this all the time, but it's so important for us to understand how species like sharks operate in these spaces, because not only are they major contributors to marine ecosystems, but it's like you always say, Jen, like if we don't understand them, then we typically don't value them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we see animals like sharks like one way, animals that have, dead eyes or are constantly a threat to human swimmers, we're missing like 99.99% of how and why they are so critical to maintaining healthy marine habitats. And Catherine is the person to speak with about this. We're so grateful to have her on the podcast. It was a really fun interview and conversation, and we went into sort of different areas that I wasn't expecting, which was really amazing.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of life and heart in this conversation that was just really, really fun for us, and we appreciate it. All right, are you ready to head out with Dr. Catherine Macdonald and learn about a new floating mechanism or technique that I feel like I could certainly benefit from, the swim bladder.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Or perhaps a large oily liver if you're a shark. Right?
I might rather just have an exterior swim bladder than a large oily liver.
Maybe just
that
arm
doesn't sound
floaties.
too good. Yeah, maybe just a boogie board.
Maybe I just actually do have a vest that's for a child, so I don't drown in the ocean. I do.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, everyone. There's so much to learn from our friends of the sea, and we will see you soon. Catherine, welcome to Kindred, and thank you so much for joining us today in a conversation we have long been wanting to have. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. If you would, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
I'm Dr. Catherine Macdonald. I'm an associate professor at the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine, Atmospheric, and Earth Science. I know that's a mouthful. The director of the Shark Research and Conservation Program at the University of Miami. And one of the co-founders of Field School, which is an independent marine science education organization.
Fantastic. That does sound like a lot. You're probably a very busy gal. So thank you for joining us today.
It's really my pleasure.
So Catherine, not everyone working in marine ecology comes to work with an incredible and dynamic species like sharks. How did you come to focus your work on them? And were sharks a species you've always been drawn to?
I was very interested in the ocean, including sharks, from when I was pretty small. But the answer of how I came to study sharks is absolutely, completely dumb luck, falling up the stairs, just having things happen for me that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that in part because this is a question I get from students a lot. How do I get to where you are? And the answer is, I could not have planned it in a million years. Mm-hmm. Do things that excite you, do them well, and it'll work out. But there isn't like a secret or a plan or a one weird trick to become a shark scientist. Mm-hmm. It's just, hopefully, if you're lucky, doing things that you're passionate about and giving them the chance to grow across your career.
So when you went to college, what did you major in? Like, what were the steps?
I was an undergraduate history major.
Great. See, this is good. We need to hear this because history majors could be like, okay, well, what do I do with my degree? Go study sharks. Look at you.
Yeah, I studied early American history at Amherst College. I did a thesis on gravestones and funerary practices in the Connecticut River Valley.
Love it.
And that really was my first experience of doing research, of gathering data, analyzing it, and using it to answer questions. So people say, well, that's a really big change. But the truth is that being a scientist is collecting data about the world and using that data to better understand it. And it doesn't really matter what you're doing that on. You're still a scientist who's answering questions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so then what was the jump from there to you're on a boat?
After I graduated, I won a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship, which is a year-long independent research fellowship that, at least at the time, had two main requirements. The project you proposed could not be related to your undergraduate major. It had to be out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
And you could not return to your country of origin for 365 days.
Wow.
Whoa.
So as part of that project, my dad asked me, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I was like, I don't know more about sharks, I guess.
Wow.
And so I proposed a project looking at the interactions between sharks and shoreline communities. And that program sent me to the Bahamas, South Africa, Mozambique, Australia, and Malaysia for a year when I was 22.
Wow.
And that sort of shifted my professional trajectory.
I can imagine. And then it seems like you were probably hooked at that point, I would think.
I am someone who can imagine loving doing lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
I actually feel really sorry for people who have one passion in life and nothing else excites them because it seems like it must be very dull.
Mm-hmm. I agreed. Fair. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, thanks for the background. I really love the sort of origin story with the people we speak with because it's just sort of like you were saying before we started, recording, like this is you stumble upon things, and sometimes people really think in their brain there has to be a very focused trajectory, and there really doesn't. And a lot of times the people we speak with were like, well, I was studying this, and then I was looking at the ocean, and then I saw that, and now I studied them. So I think that it's great to hear those stories.
The advice I give my own students is to
Hmm.
think about what you're trying to do, not as choose a destination, but as wayfind, right? So you're doing something, you say, I want more of this. I don't want more of this. I want something else.
Right.
And if you answer that question accurately over and over again, you'll end up someplace great.
That is
It's
so
probably
funny. Yeah, because I tell people that all the time. I said, just go with what's warmer. And I'm not a scientist, but go warmer or colder and then choose the warmer. And that
I
like,
love that framing.
yeah, like just you don't have to know where you're ending up. Just follow the little pebbles.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important. That's really lovely. Wow, what a great start to this conversation. We are here. And Catherine, I'd love to now dig into your research. Your work focuses on shark ecology and conservation as well as the marine environments they inhabit. You're also active in public science engagement and education, which we'll touch on a bit later. Can you tell us more about the research you and your team are conducting and how you go about collecting your data when working with sharks? I've seen a lot of photos of you on Instagram tagging all kinds of beautiful shark species, and I'm curious what those tags are revealing to you.
Yeah. So my lab broadly it's a pretty large lab. We've got about 30 students across our graduate and undergraduate programs.
Oh,
So
okay.
mostly our undergrads are field assistants who learn how to do marine research, and our graduate students are pursuing their own research projects. And so I get to be the hub of that wheel, which means that I spin a lot, and so that I get to learn all kinds of exciting things that interest other people and not just me. So broadly, we look at ecological questions, mostly but not exclusively focused on sharks.
Okay.
A couple of recent publications, we had one come out this year on nurse shark growth rates as juveniles, where we found that our nurse sharks here in Biscayne Bay, just off the coast of Miami, actually grow much faster than the calculated rates for nurse sharks in Bimini, the Bahamas. And so now as always, any scientific question you answer is going to raise a bunch of new questions.
Yeah, right.
And so we're really excited to try to better understand why, whether that's driven by genetic differences between those populations or resource availability or competition differences.
Right.
We have a paper that's about to come out looking at what are called fish aggregates for manta rays. That's from my PhD student, Emily Yeager. And basically, she looked at fish that travel with and hitchhike on manta rays.
Oh, right.
And
Okay. Sure. Sure. You see them on all kinds of like little fish on big fish. Okay.
yes, absolutely. And essentially, she found that manta rays sort of form these mobile ecosystems that some fish rely on for big swaths of their life.
Hmm.
Or my PhD student, John Plavin, the two of them are both finishing next summer. So their work is all kind of coming together right now, which is a really exciting time. He and I did a project looking at the feeding ecology of juvenile great hammerheads here in Biscayne Bay. And Biscayne Bay is the only established nursery for great hammerheads on the east coast of the United States, although there are probably a few others.
Okay.
What we found is that those juvenile great hammerheads depend primarily on resources from Biscayne Bay for their first 2 years of life before they start expanding their habitat use to habitats outside of the bay. And that means that Biscayne Bay, which is very highly human impacted, right? It's got all of Miami-Dade right on its doorstep, is also really essential habitat for this threatened species.
I just was just thinking this. I'm like, this is right outside your door. So how fantastic and exciting, and how many questions you have to answer. But this is the point.
I can't imagine ever getting bored.
I don't think you will. So take us through like a minute on the boat. Like, so you guys go out because you have to be out there, and you're quote unquote fishing or looking for, how do you identify and then capture sharks? What's the process here, and how do you handle them? And depending on what species you're sort of tagging in, maybe getting blood work from and samples?
Yeah. So we're fishing for sharks. There's not any like voluntary shark participation in research as far as I can tell, not with wild sharks anyway.
They're like, me, I'm next. They just line up
Exactly
for
right.
you.
So, we're using the least invasive methods that we can. And obviously, all of our practices are designed for animal welfare and approved by our permitting agencies and by the University of Miami's Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. But we're bringing them to us on the boat, where they're going to wind up on a semi-submerged platform with a pump in their mouth that's going to move seawater over their gills so that they can breathe while we take those samples.
Oh, right.
And then we're going to take a bunch of minimally invasive biological samples. So we're going to take a tiny 4 millimeter plug of white mussel. We're going to take a little piece of fin cartilage. That's mostly for genetics and feeding ecology studies. These are some of the samples we were using in that hammerhead diet study. A blood sample from most animals, and a bunch of measurements. So those workups usually take about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on what the set of samples we're collecting is. And then they go on their way and are usually very happy to head off and hopefully never see us again.
Yeah, right.
Aw.
That's pretty fast though, 5 or 10 minutes. That's pretty good.
Yeah, we work hard to try to keep those times low because obviously, handling
They
a
don't want to be there
for any
yeah.
animal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so do you go out looking for, today we're looking for a hammerhead shark baby, or do you have a purpose going out, or do you go out and what you fish in, what you pull in is who you deal with?
It's sort of somewhere in between those two.
Okay.
Famously, sharks are not big on cooperating with me specifically or scientists in general. So a little bit you catch what you catch, and you try to make the most of the data that generates. But we do see some what's called in ecology habitat partitioning, right, between shark species, where we have sites where we say, oh, it's a lot more likely that we'll see, let's say, a tiger shark here than in some of our other sites. So if we are looking for some specific type of data, we have a seasonal gap we need to fill with tiger sharks. We might go there hoping to catch one, but my ability to either predict or successfully determine what we'll catch is pretty low.
Sure. And it sounds like you said you had 30 plus students, that's a lot of different research happening. So like even asking you like, so what is your main research focus?
So broadly for my lab, ecology,
Okay.
including diet, habitat use, and reproduction.
Okay.
Some more biological questions as
Hmm.
well, especially where biology and conservation intersect, because reproductive biology or physiology, especially associated with capture stress, both have direct conservation implications in terms of how rapidly a species reproduces or how stressful it finds interacting with fishing gear. So broadly, mostly shark biology and ecology, but even then, there's always going to be there's not a circle I can draw other than like science that every project we do is going to sit inside.
Well, that makes sense. And it sounds like you're in a hotbed right where you are too. There's a lot going on. And this is like you're saying, this is also in context to the marine environments that they live within, right? You're studying sharks, but you're also it's so interconnected. You kind of can't study the one without the other.
Yeah. I mean, and if you think about, sharks as a predator, you can't really understand what's happening with a predatory population without having some idea what's happening with prey populations. And that means that you also have to think about what that prey is eating and what its
Yeah.
habitat requirements
Right.
are. You kind of turn into the like crazy person with the cork board with string connecting everything very quickly in ecology.
Yes, that makes sense. Wow. And just how fascinating. There is no end to any thread that you would pull on with what you're researching.
Yeah, no, I feel confident that I can spend the rest of my career answering questions about the sharks in Biscayne Bay and South Florida without ever running out of questions to ask.
That's incredible. Wow. Is there anything today that's specifically on board? No pun intended.
I'm excited, especially today, for my master's student, Katie Miller, who is defending her thesis this afternoon. And her work looked at the reproductive biology of blacknose and sandbar sharks. So she used a combination of hormone analysis of the hormones in their blood, because sort of like people, sharks use hormones to regulate reproduction, alongside mating wounds. Male sharks bite onto female sharks to
Oh.
mate. They don't have hands. So that's what you got. And so mating wounds are a commonly used measure of shark mating, and
Right.
ultrasounds of pregnant blacknose sharks. So
Hmm.
she's brought all these different tools together to try to better understand reproduction in those two species, and I'm really excited to see her defend it this afternoon.
Well, good luck to her. That sounds really interesting. Where are these sharks located? Where was she doing her studies?
The black noses are mostly from Biscayne Bay as well, and the
Oh.
sandbar sharks we find just offshore of Miami. So they're not in the bay, they're out in the Atlantic, but still within a few miles from where I'm sitting right here at the Rosenstiel School.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, just sort of thinking about that, I'd love to hear more about, shark morphology and physiology and how their anatomy contributes to their behavior and functionality and just how it makes them such dynamic and highly successful species.
So one thing that's to me especially interesting about sharks is that female sharks don't provide parental care to their offspring in the way that many apex predators do. So if we're talking about bears or wolves,
Okay.
a bear cub, a wolf pup, they kind of round up to be apex predators because of mom, even as they're not bringing down an elk themselves.
Right.
Because they're eating her kills or they're drinking milk that mean that their sort of position in the ecosystem mirrors hers, even as their capabilities don't yet mirror hers. And for sharks, when they're born, they're on their own, right? Mom gives birth and sends them on their way.
So what does
And
birth look like? What do her babies look like when I mean, I find these pods on the beach and someone's like, that's a shark pod. I'm like, okay.
yeah, so sharks, because they have this very long evolutionary history, have a lot of different reproductive strategies that help keep things spicy. We've got egg layers, but we also have sharks that practice something called aplacental viviparity, where they're laying eggs into their own uterus and then giving birth to them after they hatch.
Okay.
And then we've got some sharks that have, a direct connection between mom and pup as the pup is developing. That's very similar to mammalian placental connections to their offspring. So sharks have all kinds of strategies here. But the kind of core things that they have in common are, compared to other fishes, their offspring are very well developed and pretty much ready to rock on day one. That doesn't mean that they're great at everything they're going to do as sharks on day one, but they're able to swim, forage, hide themselves pretty much from birth because mom doesn't provide that care. But
do they look like adults, or do they look different, like to protect them? Are they like more camouflaged, or can you see a baby hammerhead and be like, oh yeah, that's a...
Yeah, so for the most part, they just look like miniature adults. You see some coloration differences in some species, but sharks are actually really reliable like that. At every stage of their lives, they're pretty much going to look like the species that they belong to. We do see morphological changes across that. Often juveniles will have, relative to their body size, bigger tails than adults. Because they're more likely to have to run from a predator than an adult.
Swim faster. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But overall, like they really look pretty similar.
Okay.
That's amazing. Wow. So they're just born loaded. They are like ready to rock and roll when they come out. And they're just like are predisposed with all this genetic sort of there's no imprinting. It's all there. They come out, download, and we're off. That is amazing. That seems very unique to me.
But it's also kind of important to note that means that a newborn shark, even if its mom is an apex predator, isn't an apex predator.
Right.
It's a silly little shark that's like, a foot, 2 feet long. And
arguably cute. So,
I think they're very cute. But,
I mean, a baby hammerhead shark must be so cute. Sorry, that's adorable.
I can make that visual happen for you. We can do that.
I think I've seen baby sharks like on the eastern shore, like a baby great white, probably what it is. It looks like a little tiny, cute shark. Like you see them. I mean, they're usually not alive, but just at the, very rarely you see them, but it's like, oh my gosh, that's a little tiny shark. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, like most babies, they look better when they're alive.
Yeah. Right. yeah.
And
but you can tell what it is, like to your point. Yeah.
But they don't. So I feel like there's some fish species that have, nurseries, but this is not them. That doesn't happen with them.
So sharks can have nurseries.
Okay.
And the great hammerhead study I'm talking about, we're a nursery for great hammerhead sharks.
Okay.
Probably for a few other species as well. Okay. But often in bony fishes, what ecologists might call teleos fishes, they have a larval stage, right? There's points in their lives where they're just teeny tiny. And for sharks, they're born pretty much looking like miniature adults. They're not that small, but they may rely on a nursery for the first few years of their life, either as a place where it's easier to find food than in other habitats, or as a place where it's easier to avoid predation than in other habitats, or some mix of those two.
Okay. And you were saying bony fish, but sharks are cartilaginous, which seems really gross. Thank you, sister. That's why you're here. But they're cartilage. They're not bone.
That's exactly right. They have
bendy and fast.
They have parts of their cartilage that are more heavily calcified that kind of perform a little bit more like bone, but they don't have bones.
And then that makes them lighter, I guess, because they're heavy. They're heavy. They look like they weighed a ton to me. But then I was reading that they have a really big liver that helps them stay buoyant. Is that true for them?
Yes, especially for slow swimming, slow moving sharks like those that you find in the deep sea. That big liver helps counteract some of the weight of the rest of their body.
Amazing.
Bony fishes have what's called a swim bladder.
Okay.
Like a little gas-filled balloon that they can inflate and deflate to make themselves neutrally buoyant. So if you've ever been at an aquarium and had a fish just kind of like making eye contact with you, the reason it can do that is it's got a swim bladder. And sharks don't. So one shark has solved this problem, the sand tiger. They'll swallow air into their stomach to maintain neutral buoyancy, and you'll often see them at aquaria. But most sharks, if they're not swimming, they're sinking. So,
okay.
They'll hang out on the bottom if they're not gonna do the work to stay up off it.
I need one of those. I'm going to tell you, you put me in the water, chances are I'm going to drown. I need one
I
of
could
those
use a swim bladder for
I need
sure,
a swim bladder. I'm going to look into that. And then just a couple other like really interesting facts I found, and please correct me, obviously, is they have these incredible immune systems that help with their longevity. And how long do they live?
It varies a fair amount.
Okay.
So we've got everything from relatively live fast, die young sharks like the bonnethead, which might live 10 years,
Okay.
to something like the Greenland shark, which the best estimates we have say you might not be sexually mature till you're over 100 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And your lifespan might look like
Girl.
100 years.
Wow.
Wow.
Sorry. Wow. Okay.
And those are those deep ocean sharks? Okay. Yeah.
That is insane. And not to mention, like, haven't sharks lived for millions of years prior to dinosaurs? I mean, they seem like they're hardy beasts.
Yep, 400 to 450 million years. So
no big deal.
For ballpark reference, dinosaurs a couple 100 million years. But sharks are also older than trees, older than the rings of Saturn. So we're talking about animals that have been on this planet as an evolutionary lineage for a very, very long time.
So respect, people. Okay, this is what we're talking about here. That is, sorry, I'm still like, I just got so tripped up by I have to be 100 in order to have a child. That is in these females are amazing. And just another couple quick things. How many shark species are there?
In the ballpark of 540. If we want to throw their relatives in there, the skates, the rays, and the chimera, we get more into the like 1,500 to 1,700 range, but sharks alone in the 540s right now.
Okay, well, you better live to 100 or more because you're never ending this research. That is just incredible. That is just that was surprising. That's surprising to me. I didn't know there were that many species.
Well, if you ask people to name a shark, they're going to give you a very small range, right? Mostly they're going to say bull shark, tiger shark, white shark, mako, maybe hammerhead, sometimes whale shark.
Yeah.
If you've got somebody who likes to think that they're quirky, they're going to say Greenland, goblin, or cookie cutter. But I doubt most people who don't work in these spaces could name more than about 10 species of shark, maybe 15.
Or 3. I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah, I've never heard of those.
I didn't know half of
a Greenland shark. I'm like, never heard of that.
Nope,
but
nope.
I'm not surprised.
Nope, nope, and nope, and nope.
But we also want to recognize that like the sharks that I just named are not the average shark, right? Our interest has overwhelmingly focused on what we as conservationists might call charismatic species, right? But the average shark on this planet is kind of somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 feet long, kind of dumpy, gray-brown, lives in the medium deep sea, right? And that's not what people imagine.
You're never going to really come in contact with them in your normal life. Yeah, okay.
What are they called?
Well, there's a ton of them, but
I was hoping you'd be like, well, that's the lesser dumpy shark. You know how birds have these crazy names, but okay, got you. Lots of them. Aw, I like dumpy sharks. I'm gonna do a children's book about dumpy sharks.
I was also wondering because you were all the different ones you were rattling off that live right there in the Biscayne Bay. How many different sharks live there?
We are habitat for at least a dozen species.
Okay.
And then we catch a few more from time to time, but I think more likely when they're passing through.
Yeah.
And that's just sharks. We've got a bunch of rays as well that live in this area.
Wow, that's incredible. So just to move on, Catherine, we hear a lot about industrial fishing and bycatch, habitat loss, pollution, climate change as massive contributors and threats to many animals and marine environments and ecosystems that they all operate within. Talk to us about the challenges sharks are facing today and the human wildlife conflict that many of these species are coming up against.
So globally, if we're talking about threats to sharks, overwhelmingly the primary threat is overfishing. So fishing that is unmanaged, unsustainably managed, and that includes target fishing and, capture of sharks when you're hoping to catch something else. So bycatch.
Okay.
And some of that bycatch might be released alive. Some of it might be kind of kept as a secondary catch, even if it's not the primary thing you're hoping to catch. Here in South Florida, commercial fishing for sharks is not a major driver of risk for the shark species that are living here. Recreational fishing has led to more shark landings in Florida than commercial fishing since 2016.
Oh.
So capture by people who are fishing for sport is a bigger threat to our sharks than capture in commercial fisheries. But obviously, those threats are really, really different in other parts of the world where sharks can be an important contributor to food security or can be a key component of local economies.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that before, where sometimes this human-wildlife conflict kind of comes into play. And we've learned from a lot of other guests that it's like the local fisherman who's catching the shark to sustain their families are being looked at in a really disparaging way. And, and that's a big thing. That's a big thing. And there's a lot of problems with that. I think that's an important sort of thing to touch on, that difference between the local fisherman who's maybe catching an endangered species, but now needs to feed their family.
Yeah. And I think that this is really just an aspect of human psychology that it helps us all to be aware of in ourselves. We know very well that we're much better at identifying other people's faults than our own.
Right.
And so we're very quick to say that other people, including sometimes extremely impoverished people, are at fault for conservation problems without recognizing the ways that our own consumption habits and lifestyles contribute to global environmental problems.
In a much greater way, usually.
Yes. And so we're very quick to hold someone morally responsible for catching a species that we don't think of as food, but we're not very good at recognizing the ways in which we can and should be making better choices ourselves. So my overwhelming thought and feeling on this is I don't think there's anything wrong with caring about the conservation of sharks. I don't think there's anything wrong with advocating for shark conservation, but I do think that if you are asking people who depend on sharks to lose access to them in order to conserve them, there is an attached responsibility to make sure that those people are okay, that you are required to assume, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Jen, we've talked to, organizations who are working in, the poaching world, and the people who are dealing with poachers really do have that sense of we're trying to balance this out, where people are trying to feed their families and make some money here. And there's actually a lot of room and space for not just the disparaging and these narratives. So thanks for talking that out a little bit. It's really important. Now, what about habitat loss? Is that a thing for sharks? Is this you think of habitat loss in the ocean, and does it apply here?
Yes, absolutely. So especially for nurseries for juvenile sharks, many of those are found in nearshore coastal environments. So as we degrade those habitats, either by allowing habitat destruction. Here in Miami, that might look like clearing coastal wetlands and mangroves to build developments or to build seawalls. It might look like declines in water quality that drive seagrass loss within Biscayne Bay, which is a really important base of that food web. It may look like changes in water quality overall that introduce contaminants into marine environments. All of those can contribute to reduced health in individuals, reduced survival, population level effects. And in some cases, we're making habitats that were historically important to sharks less and less suitable for them through warming or habitat loss or degradation.
Yeah, and we know that this stuff is also intricately interconnected, that one effect is going to play out in another. And it's like, and then you think of these sort of riparian spaces with rivers and fish, and then like coastal lines. It's also pollution comes into play then, not just on the coastal side edges, but deep into the ocean, correct?
Yes. I mean, and being right on the coastline of a big city like Miami, there's a lot of urban runoff, pesticides, herbicides
Yeah.
that are, you know, almost unavoidably being introduced into those coastal waters.
Right, right. And how about disease and viruses? Do general what do sharks come up with that? Is there we've heard in other species, that there's new viruses showing up and they're not sure what's going on. Do you come across any of that?
So we have seen some examples of sort of tissue lesions that I think have the potential to be associated with water pollution.
Okay.
But I also don't think it's a coincidence that the first reported instances of stony coral tissue loss disease, which has had a horrible effect on corals, across the Caribbean. It was first reported just a few miles from my office here in Miami, right?
Wow.
Degradation in water quality and the introduction of a lot of these kinds of microbes into marine environments can have all sorts of effects that we don't intend. There are other coral diseases that have also been previously associated with untreated human sewage, like down in the Florida Keys.
Sure.
So I absolutely expect that those are also likely to have effects on sharks and their health. But only that because sharks don't really stay put, it can be harder to capture those effects really accurately compared to something like coral that's kind of stuck where it grew.
Right.
Amazing. And just to touch back, talking about industrial fishing, is that affecting sharks and their access to food? Because we're hearing, about whales showing up emaciated and starving and things like that. Are you seeing that in your world?
Anywhere where their normal prey are being made less available through human activity, it's going to have an effect on sharks and their populations. In some cases, they might be able to manage those effects behaviorally, right? So, people have overfished snapper. Can I switch to eating some slightly different fish? Yeah, some of the time, but it depends on that alternative being realistic and available as well.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. So this is reminding me of something I want to touch on too, and it's a follow-up question to this. Earlier, I mentioned your work in public science engagement and education outreach. In your experience, do these spaces help to bridge or balance some of these conflicts that arise around marine conservation? And I guess how would you define public science engagement in context to your own work?
So I think that it's sort of common for people to care about some things and not other things, and that's very natural. It's not that I don't understand why there's more conservation interest in beautiful, colorful coral reef fish than in hagfish, right? Like I get it.
Sure.
But I think that there's this belief that it's a buffet and we can pick and choose. And that, I can say, oh, well, I want those colorful coral reef fish, but I don't care what happened
Yeah.
to the seagrasses over here. Like when they
Yeah.
wash up, they smell kind of weird. I don't like it when stuff touches my legs while I'm swimming. Seagrass doesn't matter to me. And the fact that we, as like the general public, may not be able to see the ways that those species and ecosystems are linked doesn't mean they're not. And so where we think we can make choices about what is and isn't important, we often end up having a lot of unintended consequences. And so I think part of public science engagement is trying to surface how complex this is. And I think that a lot of people recognize intuitively when that complexity is visible to them, that we should maybe be careful about the changes we make if we don't know what their repercussions will look like. But when they're envisioning it as something where it's perfectly plausible to say, yes, that species, but not this one, that's where we tend to get into more trouble.
Yeah, I love that, the picking and choosing. And I think that's where, humans, and it's part of what we try to do here at the podcast, is connect people to all of these different ideas where it may not be the most sexy, krill's not the most sexy conversation, but boy, does it matter. And wow, do we need krill to be feeding our oceans and that sort of thing. And I think it's just, this is why we love these conversations to hear, because it really does, it's all connected, and you can't pull one pillar out and not weaken the whole system. And I think that's where the work you're doing is so incredible, inspiring, and your outreach. You do a lot of this work, it seems like, just looking you up and like reading, like learning about you before we talked. That seems really important to you. And I think it's such a critical aspect of science.
I think that a couple of studies came out during my PhD that really influenced me, especially that showed most people in the general public don't know a scientist. If you ask them to name scientists, they either name people who are dead, like Einstein, or people who it's a little bit of a stretch to describe their profession as scientists, like Bill Gates.
Wow, interesting. Yeah.
And so people who don't know scientists and don't understand a lot about the scientific process, I understand why you might not intuitively trust us, right? Because one of the key underlying principles of science is that you follow the data, and if the data changes, your mind changes, right? And to me, that's a strength of science, right? It's not just a body of knowledge, it's an ongoing process. It's not ever finished, and it's always evolving.
Right.
But that also means that when we find out something new and we say, oh, it turns out that that initial study was wrong, and these 3 follow-up studies show this, people are like, well, you can't make up your mind about anything. We can't trust you to answer questions.
And that's so interesting, because the older I get, and I'm getting quite old, I have noticed that certainty is such a thing that people want to hang their hat on. They want to have a piece of information that never changes. And that is not very realistic in the natural world, especially. And that's one thing that we've learned from talking to a lot of scientists, is that things evolve, like you said, when data changes, as the world changes, as also technology changes. There's so many things that play into it. But people do not like to have to, if you know a fact and you go to your cocktail party and you say that fact, you feel fancy. And if someone says, well, actually, that's not true anymore, like bite mark analysis. I love true crime. I've been into it for a long time. And, now that is, they call it now straight up junk science. I mean,
interesting.
It's not a thing anymore. It's not data driven. But that's really hard if somebody spent their life being a bite mark person, or you knew something about bite marks, then you have to change. Anyway, I understand why it happens, but I think it's this obsession with being certain, because it makes us feel powerful to be certain.
Right.
And I think
as a scientist, you come to understand that your choices are between being wrong and angry about that and being wrong and curious about that.
Yes.
But there is no version where you don't ever have to be wrong.
Right. And people do not like that much.
I love that. This is where we say this all the time. This goes across the board. And also, I mean, my sort of impression is that science isn't facts, isn't real science, is always being challenged, and always, this is part of the definition of science, is it not? Where like, you're going to be wrong, move on, learn, do better.
It's sort of a living entity. Like it changes. It's guaranteed to change, right? I mean, yeah.
I actually have a quote that I'm going to hit you with from a paper that I love called The Importance of Stupidity in Scientific Research.
Yes, hit me.
One of the beautiful things about science is that it allows us to bumble along, getting it wrong time after time, and feel perfectly fine as long as we learn something each time.
I love that. And I think you could say
that is amazing.
A beautiful thing about humanity is that also. I think you could just say that about being human, is that if you're willing to be wrong, it's a lot more relaxing.
And like you say, replace that with curiosity always. Like we've talked about at the top of this conversation, your work never needs to be done. You have 500 plus species that you'll never ever meet. This is an endless ongoing experience. And that's the beauty of science. It isn't just facts. There's so much more to it than that. And that's a banging quote. I love that.
Yeah, that is.
We are going to be using that. That's so brilliant.
One of my mentors when I was a student talked about science as every scientist spends their career making a little brick to add to the wall of science. And if you're lucky, it will be a high quality and enduring brick.
Yeah.
And that's all that you can hope for.
Yeah.
I love that. So shifting gears a little bit, Catherine, I'd love to hear a favorite shark experience that you've had. I guess share with us a story that always comes to mind that holds special meaning for you, if it's not too personal.
Yeah. So I'm gonna start with the disclaimer that literally all of the sharks that I've ever worked with have every right to hold a grudge and never want to see me again. I'm not I'm not espousing a deep connection to them that's mutual. I don't think that I don't think that they feel that way about me.
They don't want to be your friend. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. They don't
but
need
very
to.
early in my career, I was involved in releasing a captive tiger shark who was not doing well in captivity from captivity. I actually tell a whole story about this on Story Collider if folks are feeling like they want to go hear the full story. But the short version is I made this decision that we were going to release the shark, which I was very anxious about because I was in my 20s. And we let it go. And basically, I flipped the bird to all of my responsibilities for the day and grabbed a kayak and sort of kayaked out with it as it was being released because I wanted to make sure that it swam away okay. And in general, when you release a shark, it is out of there. It does not want to see you again. You know, when in my current work, we release a shark and there's a photographer in the water, we're lucky if they get 5 frames of it before it's out of sight.
Right.
And this tiger shark spent, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes at least, kind of just swimming right next to my kayak. And, you know, it's not that we made eye contact or anything, but it was very meaningful to me, especially at that age, to have taken this risk of releasing her when I thought I might get in trouble for it. And for her to give me this chance to see her in her element.
Wow. That's cool.
That's really lovely. That's really beautiful. I mean, I'm like here for that story. That is really lovely. And that feels very real. Thanks for sharing that. I love that. That's very sweet. And then when she swam off, did you pause for a minute? And I mean, was this an emotional experience for you, or did it feel like it was once she went, it was good?
It was. So I think that as a scientist, you know, one of the things that I had to grapple with and that my students have to grapple with is the reality that we do harm to individual animals as part of our research. We do our best to make that the smallest possible amount of harm to answer the question.
Right.
And, you know, everybody on my team cares about that, is motivated by it. But, you know, you get into the field, at least in part because you care about these animals and their outcomes. And you do harm to individuals in the hopes that it benefits populations to a greater degree than it harms individuals. And that's just like the reality of doing research. And I think it's true for anyone who is really honest with themselves who does animal research. You know, if you catch birds, if you catch fish, if you, tranquilize or dart lions,
Right.
you're going to have animals that don't have the outcomes that you want. You're going to have things that don't go quite right doing field work. And so the day that you stop caring about that is the day you should quit your job.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Well, thanks for sharing that story. And Catherine, we end each episode with the question, why is this conversation important? And we would ask, what message or insight do you most hope stays with us and listeners after hearing this conversation?
I think one piece of it, I would be hopeful that maybe some of our conversation about science and its nature and how it operates would help people give us a little more benefit of the doubt. Because as someone who works with a lot of scientists, for the most part, we really want to get it right. We really care about the things that we study from virology all the way up to basking sharks. And so, understanding that science is not a perfect process and that scientists are not perfect people doesn't mean that it's not the best tool we have to understand the world. And so, especially in a time and place where I feel like criticism of science and, explicit politicization and demonization of scientists as a political tool is active, you understand that when you go to the doctor, they can, you take your grandmother to the doctor, they can talk to you about probabilities of different outcomes, right? But the question that you really want the answer to is, if this was your grandma, what would you do?
Yeah.
Right.
And so understanding that we're doing our best to tell you what we would do, and that's not apolitical, right? Because it has political implications. But that if we're doing our jobs well, it is based in data and expertise that we've spent decades building.
Yeah.
I think that we could build a better world using data.
Yes, I'm really struck by what you're saying. And I think we believe very much in what you said. And we also would say we've never spoken to a guest that's dedicated their lives to a species that didn't deeply care for that species. And we don't need to talk, do you love sharks? Well, I don't know, probably. However, there's so much more to it than that. And you, like you said, they don't need to love you back, nor do they, nor should they. And also, I love the benefit of the doubt and really hearing what you're saying and how you're saying it, and just it's really important to hear your perspective on that. And I appreciate you sharing that, especially right now in the climate that we're in, like you say. And this is where we're deeply grateful for you coming on the show and speaking with us about stuff that is so important and so critical. It means a lot to us. And we know it means a lot to you in doing the best science in the best integrity. And we see you as one of those people. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And is there any place that we can follow your work?
Absolutely. You can find my lab on Instagram at Shark Tagging.
Shark Tagging, okay.
And you can find me there at Dr. Catmac.
Okay.
And I'm very happy to see you there if possible. You can also find us on the web at sharktagging.com.
Okay.
And what was that thing where you said what was that place the platform where you said you told that whole story about that shark?
It's a podcast called Story Collider that
Okay.
I would say everyone should go listen to Story Collider stories. They're called True Stories About Science. And basically they just give scientists the chance to tell personal stories. And a lot of them are really wonderful. I taught an outreach class a few years ago where I gave them the assignment to go listen to one story, and almost no kid came back having listened to
only one. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
Wow, thanks for that recommendation. That is a hot rack. Thank you. That's really exciting. We will put that in we will link that in our show notes, because we're always looking for incredible content like that. So that's really exciting. Well, Catherine, have a great day. Good luck in your work in the next 100 years. You live a long life and a happy, healthy one. And we're just gonna keep following you and watching your work. And just thank you so much. Thanks so much for speaking with us.
It's been such a pleasure.
All right, take care. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the takeaway. That was such a mind-opening conversation, and I think for me, the biggest takeaway, which I'll dig into in a second, was sort of really hearing like there's like a psychology of our human species and how we process and react to like animals like a shark. And I'm asking a lot of questions here because I don't know the answer to a lot of this. It's just fascinating, the psychology of our experience to these types of predators and animals.
Yeah.
And I think, here's Catherine and her students, and they are doing a variety of studies and research on a variety of species of sharks in their specific area. And, they're doing all this trying to figure out the interconnected, relationship that sharks have to these marine ecosystems and habitats they live in, and just how critical they are and why. And, here's Catherine doing all this conservation research and science. And then we kind of roll in and we're like, but I don't like sharks. And they're scary because they have weird dead eyes, which I don't know if that's true or not. But, then they attack swimmers and all these kind of things. And they have no feelings and blah, blah, blah. And it just really got me thinking about sort of the psychology of the human perspective of animals that we deem, and we're talking a lot about this in this season, like we've covered, we're talking about hyenas, sharks, bats, possums, etc., right?
Right.
And, you and I will say it's so boring and we're so over it. And yet I think it's something we need to dig into a little bit because it's a thing, right? I mean, it just seems like we can't let this go somehow. And she used this term buffet, which I'll get to that in a minute. Because here's the thing, when you dig into the critical role that sharks play in a marine ecosystem, you start to understand much more about them, and you care less if you want to pet them or not. And you start to realize, okay, so if you look across the board of all these different species, some of them are apex predators, and we know, but a lot of these sharks aren't. They're, these smaller 3 to 4, they're not apex predators like the big giant sharks that offer millions of teeth. And, we already know about these categories like mutualists, ecosystem engineers, indicator species, umbrella species, foundation species. We've heard this for now years in this podcast. And if you just sort of scroll through, like Google what their contribution is, all of these different species, they help with population control, habitat protection, seagrass and, kelp forests, protection and support, coral reefs, nutrient recycling, carbon sequestrians, and they help prevent disease, and they're part of ecosystem resilience, right? So take one of these, maybe a tiger shark that's sort of moving through, let's say, seagrass, and they help move along turtles so they're not just sitting there munching away all day.
Right.
But that's just one sort of small
benefit. Yeah. I wonder if we could just zoom back out of all of it, not even shark specific, but every species, and just trust what's true. I believe is that they're all here for a reason. They're all here for a reason. And it doesn't just mean we get the cute, cuddly ones. Right. Because if we didn't have the ones that ate the cute, cuddly ones, we'd be overrun with cute, cuddly ones. I mean, just to trust that nature has a plan, and that it doesn't have to be our preference if we like that animal or not. It's just that weird sort of perspective that, again, we were talking a little bit about, that we're at the top of it all. And that's just our perspective in general as how we move through life, is that we're at the top of it all. I want that. I want this. I don't want that, to your point.
Right. And I want this and don't want that is like this when she called it the buffet.
Exactly. Oh, and I don't like that. I'm going to skip that. Yeah.
I'm going to coin this the buffet effect, but I'm going to give it to Catherine, because there should be a term in conservation called the buffet effect that is strictly in context to our perspective. Yeah. You're so right. And we're like, well, lay it all out. I'm like, I want that. Nope. Don't want that. Want that. Don't want that. And this is where,
because what it's based on is so superficial. It's on our initial opinion of something.
Totally. Our often uninformed. Uninformed. You're exactly right.
And that's why I mean initial. It's just it's a reaction rather than based on anything real. Oh, I don't like that. Yeah.
Well, and you know what? You saying that reminds me of what Catherine was saying at one point too, that I want to kind of highlight again, is that she was talking about how in science, could you just maybe trust us, but give us the benefit of the doubt here, right? Mm-hmm. So all this stuff I just rattled off that you can Google, all
Right.
of these things that sharks, she's been spending years and years, there's scientists for years and years and years and years and years getting
Backing
us this
up.
information,
Right.
saying,
Yeah.
hey, so maybe just give them the benefit of the doubt that sharks are super, super important, and this is why. And why do I have to love them? I
Right.
don't need to love them. I need to respect them, and I need to support them. Because ultimately...
and exactly. And her point was, we're not making this up. We change our minds all the time based on research. If we can come in with a theory, but if we can't back that up with research, then we change our mind.
Right.
That's what we do. We don't stick to our theories.
Yeah.
Which is it's very interesting to think about. I've been thinking about it a lot since then. Just if we use that to guide us through our life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do I have anything to back that up, or is it just purely conjecture and opinion?
Right.
It might be a lot. There'd be a lot fewer stupid arguments anyway. Yeah.
Oh, that is for sure. That is so true. And I think for me overall, I think I'm going to speak for myself. I feel like I sit here, I have the luxury and possibly even the privilege of picking and choosing what I deem worthy. And yet, why do I have to do that? Trust Catherine and her team and her students. And like, you're telling me this, it's just something that I think isn't really that difficult, but it seems to be. It seems to be something we continue to do when we look at this incredible planet of ours.
And I think not only trust scientists, but also the after the semicolon, I think you could write "stay in your lane," which is we don't know very much at all about that.
Yeah.
We haven't spent our life studying it, and that's I think something that I think is in my brain because of so many conversations we've had like this, where people have spent their lives 30 years studying hyenas, 12 years studying the deep sea, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, maybe you know a little bit more than I do.
Yeah, and actually really deeply care it's in the best interest of these ecosystems and us as well.
The big picture, right? Yeah.
The big picture, like zoom out. So thank you so much to Catherine.
Yeah,
I found it just a really inspiring and stimulating conversation. And like I said in the introduction, if you consider sharing this episode and telling people who love and especially hate sharks about this episode, share it with people. I think it's so critical in shifting our perspective on these animals. So again, if you want to learn more about Catherine and her team, all of the links will be in our show notes, and head to our website to find out more information. Keep an eye on our Instagram. We'll be, of course, talking this like we always do for the next couple weeks. And again, thanks everyone for listening and supporting. And next time you get in the ocean, know that there are all these different species rolling around out there, and they have zero interest in you mostly.
Yeah.
And and when you watch Shark Week, remember that they're not all out to get us. Shark Week, Discovery Channel. Anyway, different subject. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Take care, and we will see you next time. Lots of love.
Take care.
Kindred is hosted by me and my sister Jen. Produced by Kat Gaddy and myself. Sound production and editing by Dan Cooper. Original music by Ellie Grace. And our Kindred artwork was created by Lindsay Coffin. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and feel free to contact us through our website at kindredpodcast.co, where you can also find details about Kindred Plus, our subscription service, as well as links to our social media accounts and show notes.